Hello and welcome to this month's painting tutorial. This month we're going to focus on giving your paintings the illusion of depth perception. So a background that's fuzzy and a point of interest in the foreground that has some sharp detail. So the subject matter for this month is going to be a fly on a flower. And the first step is to sketch it out on your paper. I'm going to do that using a charcoal pencil. I'll sharpen the tip on some sandpaper. Then whenever accuracy is important, give yourself some rough guidelines around the margin of the photograph that you're working from. So notice how I divided everything into centers, and then I'll divide it into quarters, and that will just help me to eyeball roughly where things should go. Now I'll take those measurements to my paper, and you'll notice that the dimensions of the photo and the dimensions of the paper are different. So I'm going to sketch a border on one side that will give me dimensions closer to the reference material. And then on that side, I'll make those same rough marks. So the halfway point and then halfway between top and that middle and halfway here. Then, you see the tip of this leaf is right above the halfway point about here, and it extends about to the center here. There's a center mark. So I'm going to start by sketching those large shapes, and then once the large shapes are in place, I can place the smaller ones. My lines are very, very light. I want them to be easy to erase because I know that none of these are really accurate yet. I just want to get a rough placement of everything. Now once you have things sketched in roughly, then take more time and start to clean up your lines. Once you have your painting sketched out on the paper, you might need to use some masking fluid to protect your small edges. So what you're looking for is small sharp details, especially lines, of light colored objects juxtaposed against dark colored backgrounds. So I'm going to use masking fluid to protect these flowers and also some detail on the fly. So get yourself some masking fluid. It comes in pots or it can come in little needle tools like this so that you can squeeze it out. Whatever form of it you choose, you're just going to have to carefully use the masking fluid to protect those fine details. When your masking fluid is dry, then you're ready to start painting. But working from the back forward will allow you to layer the colors on top of each other. And that way the closest elements look like they're on top of the background instead of the background color being painted around the foreground. So I'm going to start with a large flat, and I'm going to work in the background first. So you'll see that there are some various different greens, some olive and some Kelly greens, really blurry back there. Now for a blurry effect, it's best to work wet on wet because that will allow you to lose any sharp lines. I'm going to keep it from going everywhere by painting the water in the area around the foreground elements, and that way I'll have a nice wet on wet wash without losing too much control. And I'm just working with clean water here. Alright, then I'm going to mix up my limey olivey color, and then I'm just going to lay some color in like this. You see how the paint just floods into the wet areas. So I'll just mix in some different colors of green to give the impression of some different leaves and things. But see, even in these really loose areas, I'm not giving control completely over. I have the water masking technique to ensure that I maintain some control over the medium, and then I can tilt the board and help it to flow so that I don't get too much brushwork in the paint. But even that is going to be controlled because the paint will only go where the water is. Back here there's also some browns, so I'll drop those in, and because I've masked out those flowers, I can go right over the top and up to the edge. Remember, watercolor paint tends to dry 2 to 3 shades lighter than you put it down, so don't be afraid of putting plenty of color in the washes. Otherwise you're just wasting time. You're going to have to go back and add more color to them again. Having said that, I'll go back and drop in some more vibrant greens. Alright, now down here it's more in focus, so it's not going to be that really lost color. So I'm going to paint that after the rest is dried. So now I'm going to flip this upside down since my table is at a slight tilt, and that way the color will flood back down as it dries and I won't have these sharp edges right around the flowers and leaves. And I'll come back to you when it's time to push forward. Alright, here's this fuzzy background, and here it is compared to what you see on the reference material. So you can see that it's not an exact duplicate. So if you want to make it more like the photo, the next step is to get a round brush, get it wet with some just clean water, and you can pick out some of those circles that you get from the photo effect. So I'll just blot out some of that additional detail that I want to see. You can do the same thing with a flat and just make some of those fuzzy, vague lines. I just pick it out. This paint is fresh, so it's going to come up really easily, and I do a little blot. And it adds a little bit more interest to the background. It makes it look like there's some more things going on back there. And if you have any messy areas, you can clean those up with the same technique. Now that that's done, I'm going to move forward a bit in the picture plane and work on the elements that are still out of focus, but they're more visible, more shapely than the very background elements, which are very out of focus. So I'm talking about these leaves and the leaf shapes that are behind the fly and behind the flowers that are in such sharp focus. I'm first going to put in this really bright Kelly green right here behind this thistle. And I'm using my flat brush on the side, and I'll just pull it down. And there you have the first leaf. But remember, it's not supposed to look like it's in really sharp focus. So, in order to make it look like it's in less focus, I'm just going to lose one of these edges. I'm going to wash my brush off, blot it so it's not too wet, and then I'm just sort of scrubbing away the background color, letting it blend with that leaf color, and this will give me the effect that I'm after. I'm going to do the same process up on this edge of the leaf, sort of washing away the detail on the edge. Now I'll do the same thing here, re-wetting this background area, so I'm extending past the shape of the leaf, re-wetting and kind of scrubbing out some of that background, and then I'll go in with a more vibrant color and I'll just drop some in here and there. I don't want that to draw as a hard line, so I'm just wash it away a bit, just like this. And move on to the next one, just back here. And this color is a lot lighter, so I'll put it down and then I'll end up washing most of that out. But then I want some more detail in these leaves, so I'm going to slice out a highlight in the middle vein, just using a damp flat brush. And then to make it brighter, you can lift that out with a paper towel. Then I'll add some green to this leaf down here, and I'll add a spot or two of some accent blue-green around this vein on the leaf. But now we're ready to move forward into the foreground. So I'm going to get rid of the masking fluid. I like to do that with a rubber cement eraser. I'm only going to remove the masking fluid in areas where the background is already painted. So now I'm going to go in with a small round, and I'm going to add some of this detail to the foliage in the foreground. It just takes some time. Make sure that you don't get lazy. You need to match your colors. This is a square of the same watercolor paper that I'm painting on, and it ensures that I'll know exactly how the color will look on the paper before I put it down. Now down here is going to be the tricky part, because there's a lot of stuff going on and you want it to be accurate. So it's just a matter of mixing up some different colors and taking your time to make them accurate. First I'll start with this greeny yellow for the stems, and I'll add those. I might have to paint these details twice, but I need to get them down so they can be a roadmap for me. You just need to start somewhere, and it makes sense to start with the lines or the shapes that give you the most direction. But now that I have those stems in place, I'm going to change to Kelly green and start to add some of these different colored leaves. Just slowly take your time like this. It's going to take a while, but if you take care at this step, you're going to be pleased with your results. Now that these stems have dried a little, I'm just going to go right over the top of everything. Since this color is lighter than anything on top, it shouldn't smear. And the only thing that I'm avoiding is the actual flowers themselves. I'll go right over those seed pods, I'll go right over everything else. While that color is still wet, I'm going to make it just a touch darker here and there. And remember, no matter what you're doing in watercolor, it's always going to be more effective to let 2 or 3 colors mix on the page. Now this background is dry, so I can start layering some details on top of it. So I'm going to get my 1-inch flat wet, and I'm going to add a few more of those different colored greens. And it's the same process as before. Just get a test strip of paper and match your colors before you put them down. And in this pass I'm working on leaves and the seed pods. So whatever is behind, put that down first. So I'll add the rest of these leaves off camera. You've seen me paint enough leaves. Now let's move to the foreground and add some of these flowers. I'm going to start with a base tone and keep it nice and light. Let's see here, for instance, where it's juxtaposed against a darker leaf. I don't even have to take my time, I can just brush it over. And I'll do that same process over all of the flowers. And you can see how similar the painting process is to drawing. I start by adding my large shapes, let them dry, and then I start building in and adding details, building it up and up. I'm going to use a flat like this and just add a few shadow shapes that will help the eyes see these as little blossoms crisscrossing in the front of the flower. And then the last thing I'm going to do in this stage is add those seed pods. I'll do that with a round brush because they're fairly small, and they have some light color in the background and then some dark crisscrosses in the front. I'm just going to start by establishing the light color. So you just kind of look for those little shapes of the seed pods, paint them in, let them dry, and then add detail over the top just like you do with the leaves or the blossoms or anything else. So I'm at a good spot now to let this dry. Off camera I'm going to add some more of these details in the foreground, and then I'll be coming back to you and we'll finish up by painting that bee. Now those background elements are in and we are up to the last detail. So dive in with a small round, and I'm going to start by working on the bee. He has this bright orange body. I'm going to start with the orange, and then when that dries I can layer the black right over the top. While I'm waiting for it to dry, I'll go in under those flower petals and I'll add some shading there. Do take your time, especially in the blossoms that are supposed to be in high focus, because you should be able to see every little hair. When I get to those fuzzier ones down here, I can be a little bit more haphazard like this. Use a damp round and just sort of roll some shading color on. Then I can add some little dark dots and lines, just like what I see on the picture. All of these details are what I do last. So let me add some of this black to the bee now that he's fairly dry. Got some little hair sticking off his bumbly bee body here. And then the wings are sort of gray. So that's the final stage of the painting, and it's just going to take some time to fill in all those little details. There's no trick to it, it's just a matter of putting the time in. So let me go ahead and do that, and I'll leave you with this one last time, and then I'll come back and show you how the finished piece looks after those details have all been added in. With those final details in place, this is the finished painting. The composition works because the eye is focused here where there's high contrast, and then it travels down following the line of purple flowers up to this sharp edge and around to these dark figures in the background. So this concludes the lesson on how to use different watercolor techniques to make anything from a soft edge in the background to a hard, high contrast edge, and by so doing, add realism to your painting by helping the eye to move in and out of the picture plane, just like you do in real life when you're focusing on something that's close to you. I'll download the image that I use so that you can paint the exact same thing at your own studio if you wish. Otherwise, I would recommend using similar techniques on a reference material of your choosing. Anything will work as long as you have blurry background and something sharp and in focus in the foreground. So that concludes this month's painting tutorial. I hope that you've learned some things you can take to your own studio, and I thank you so much for watching.